morning. Happy Friday, everybody. So glad it's the end of the work week. Welcome to Sunrise Extra. We have a very special topic, guys, and a very special guest. Hey, that's Dr. Doreen Dodgen-Magee. She is a local psychologist and an author and just a friend of the show. Doreen, good morning.
Friend of the show, friend you should know.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Doreen, what do you think of your special graphic? I love the little red glasses, your trademark.
I noticed that. I love it.
So cute.
It actually looks like the cover of a Beatles album, and like you're crossing Abbey Road
Oh, I
or
like
something.
that.
Yeah.
We're elevating you today, for sure.
I feel like part of it's the team. It's very cool.
Yeah, sometimes I think of Doreen as like our Zen priestess, as well as being
You
a
always say
psychologist.
that, I know.
I do. I don't know. I always feel really centered when I talk to you. So we are talking about the new normal. And by the new normal, we just mean kind of getting back out there as the world reopens, as we get our COVID shots, as we go back to work and school, as we see more friends and family. I mean, it's such an exciting time, but it's also fraught because some people have a few issues, a little nervous, apprehensive about getting back out there. So Doreen, can we start big picture? Can you kind of give me your top one or two tips? What should we tuck away and take away as we start to re-enter a more normal type of life?
I'd love to. I think the biggest thing, if I had to say one thing overarching, would be to kind of stay very close to the old Irish saying, be kind to everyone, for theirs is a difficult journey. And I think we are all coming out of our own very distressing year, in addition to coming out culturally and corporately of a very distressing year. And people are going to have a myriad of responses, some of which make absolutely no sense to us. But one thing that we can be pretty sure of is that we're all going to be on edge, and we're going to have some weird reactions to things we didn't expect to. We're expecting to be mostly excited, so we're going to be shocked when then we do our first social gathering and we feel exhausted or let down, or when others feel on edge. So I think the biggest thing we could do is be kind to ourselves and everyone else as we do this very odd dance of re-entering.
Sounds like we're going to need a coach, Dr. Doreen, to get us through like the next big party we have. And to help us through the social gathering, we have Dr. Doreen. But I mean, what would be some of the tips then? Do you have any suggestions? You know, the first you have one of those big gatherings that you literally have not been a part of for over a year now.
I think one of the first things we can do is begin to think about practicing our social interaction skills, which I know seems crazy, but when we are limited to these small boxes and connecting with each other in spaces like, video chat, we do lose touch with a lot of kind of the normal interaction and energetic exchange that happens in in-person gatherings. And we've all been very fatigued with Zoom. That's a very real thing we know about now, but also about to probably become pretty fatigued in just that kind of navigating those social spaces. Social anxiety was on the rise and was pretty common prior to the pandemic. And so there is the expectation that that's going to pop up for people who never even imagined that they would become kind of uncomfortable socially. So any small opportunities we can take to begin kind of getting comfortable in those spaces, and then also recovering from those spaces. So, if you do have a big gathering or you feel like you make a big social bumble and you make a big mess, then, making sure that you kind of talk yourself through and give yourself a pep talk, maybe get a pep talk from a friend so that you aren't anxious when you try it again, because it is going to be very odd to do this thing that was typically, quite normal in the past.
Yeah, no kidding. I always, I feel like I am out of practice of just, not talking to, my immediate coworkers, but like people that you don't really know, or you may bump into someone in the produce section. You're just like, excuse me. Or like I ran into someone that's kind of an acquaintance at the grocery store the other day, and I was just like I can't. You're out of practice, just like you said. So are there like little things that you should kind of force yourself to do, of like, go up and talk to somebody new, or like now we're getting some more people like in our building now that things are kind of starting to open up. So we have a couple new producers that we've hired that are brand spanking new. I mean, do you challenge yourself to like walk up to somebody and practice speaking like a human and just introduce
like you're doing
yourself,
right now, right?
I mean, is that a good idea?
I think you do. And I think part of what we are facing, and this I think has been true during the pandemic as well, but our brains rely on novelty to kind of, expand neural pathways and to be comfortable having things to think about, and we have had a lack of novelty in our lives in the last year. And the same is true for conversational skills. We rely on having had experiences that we can then bring up in our conversations with others, and that's where we're lacking right now. We have a very small set of circumstances to talk about. So I think a lot of what we're going to find ourselves leaning toward in our first kind of social gatherings is a lot of talk about the pandemic, which is also likely going to raise more conflictual kinds of conversations or mismatches of ideology. And that's where we do want to do exactly what you're suggesting, Nina, and have a list of some things we can bring up that are, would have typically been in the schmoozing category.
Right.
And literally have them in mind and challenge ourselves to just do those awkward interactions that are really challenging in the best of times and that are going to be really wonky in this time.
Yeah.
So I know that we're pretty much ready to just move on, but are there any things like hobbies or habits that you hope will continue even after we're kind of past this pandemic phase?
I do. And I hear in working on this book that I have coming out, I have heard from a lot of people in my anecdotal research that one of the things that I think people are finding that they really benefited from and appreciated, it was a forced, slower pace. And it would be very easy for us to just hop right back into life and become hyper scheduled, hyper connected, to really fill our calendars. And I think we would all benefit both individually and communally from thinking long and hard about what in our lives, what activities in our lives really square with our values, really square with what we hope for in life, and that we can pare down and kind of let go of some of those kind of extra things that make our lives lived at such fast pace that we can't keep up and stay healthy. So I do really think that one of the biggest things we can do is really try to privilege maintaining a part of our lives that is a little slower, that is a little more realistic than this kind of fast-paced, hyper-scheduled lives we were living.
No kidding. I love, we had all these social media fads during the pandemic of like people were sharing recipes and making sourdough bread, and bike sales went through the roof of people, wanting to get outdoors and ride a bike. Are there any hobbies that you've noticed that people picked up that would be like really healthy to keep those going? I mean, obviously, exercise and bike riding is great, cooking is great. Any kind of ones that maybe you're gonna keep taking with you when things start opening up?
One, I think that is a really fantastic thing is board games and puzzles, things that we can do with our hands and our bodies. And I hope that those trends last. I also do think that we did begin to appreciate very small pleasures and joys like fresh air and moving our bodies. And in a way we didn't when we kind of just took for granted those daily routines of having to leave our house for work. I think many people found themselves, sitting and going straight from a Zoom meeting to checking their social media, to checking the news and just doing a lot of sitting. So I do really hope that some of the interesting ways of being outside and even being outside together, in the Scandinavian countries where we see high levels of happiness in life and life contentment, they do things like have their babies nap outside in the freezing cold because they sleep so much. Yeah, they'll
Picturing
bundle
sunshine.
them all. They'll bundle them all in their stroller and be outside during nap time because of the fresh air issue. And so I think that's probably for me the biggest one, is that I hope we continue to be outside, to not take for granted our opportunities to move and breathe and bake bread and sit at a table together and eat it while we do a puzzle.
I have enjoyed the amount of sourdough waffles we've had in our house since last March.
Waffles, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, very, very good. Dr. Doreen, will you take viewer questions at this time? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
It's actually a funny one from a viewer that watches us every day. Jeff Lucas is his name. For the doctor. Since I am self-employed, Jeff Lucas says, when I talk to myself at home, can I just call that a staff meeting? Is that acceptable, doctor?
I say yes. We have to start having healthy relationships with others by having healthy relationships with ourselves. So a conversation with yourself is a great idea. That's another COVID phenomenon is people talking to themselves is on the rise, and they fear that maybe that is like a psychological concern. It's fantastic. Another huge thing that is coming out in the research is that word finding is a real issue for people. They just, like in a conversation, they just can't come up with a word. And that's part of that lack of novelty. Our brains literally just have pruned off some of the portions related to kind of
spontaneity. They'll turn back on though, right? As soon as we start using them again?
Yep.
Can't find a button.
That's what,
okay.
Which brings up a really important, that's another really important thing. It would be easy right now, once we are fully vaccinated and there are safe protocols and we know we can enter safely, it's important to force ourselves to do so. It would be really easy for some people to just say, I'm still holding back. And that's okay. However, our brains have really experienced some pruning that we really do want to make sure we force ourselves into social spaces and interactions that will pop some wiring into those regions.
I have to deviate just for a moment because we were all smiling there at the topic of talking to one's self. I mean, it was just, I think, like Tuesday morning in between in a commercial break, Brenda, I think, admitted to the fact that she talks to herself a lot at home. And then Nina said, yes, I do that all the time.
Is that an only child thing, I wonder, with us? Like playing with our dolls and whatever by ourselves?
Crazy, Dr. Doreen. Maybe that was a bad diagnosis on my
said
part.
It was a sign of high intelligence.
I hope so.
I'm all with that diagnosis, yep.
That's hilarious. When I first started this series, because like I mentioned, Doreen on our Sunrise News has been here Monday through Friday. We're wrapping this up with Sunrise Extra. But I was kind of thinking, because I am a little bit of the nervous Nellie, who is kind of like, okay, I'm going to see how it goes. I'm really looking forward to seeing family, but I do have a little trepidation. So I thought, I'm reaching out to Doreen. I'm going to see, what other people are feeling, what she's hearing. And I came to find out, what a crazy universe thing, that you're working on the book that you mentioned. We couldn't get to all of it, but when is it coming out? What's it called? What else can you tell us? Because you're talking about these very same things in the book you're about to publish.
I am. So the book is titled Restart, Designing a Healthy Post-Pandemic Life. And just came to me in January. I've been working with COVID survivors throughout the entire year, and then also trying to do as much as I can to facilitate people getting through this time with their mental health and their relationships intact. So the book is just really digging into kind of the communal experience we've had during this time, everything from how we hoarded toilet paper to how we then developed these crazes like sourdough bread and now waffles, which I'm craving. And then goes into how can we use this kind of beautiful, anxiety-provoking, overwhelming, fantastic opportunity for what I'm thinking of as kind of a do-over to really make sure, again, that we look at the habits that we are arriving at this time in life with and to square those with our values. Is our value really to make every single person in our lives happy, or is our value to make sure that we are living according to the values of generosity and kindness, and that maybe we're going to have to sometimes not be able to meet everybody else's need? And so how do we choose wisely what to spend ourselves on and not? And then also how to kind of think about setting up some new norms that will make our lives run a little more smoothly in this, again, opportunity for a do-over. One of the most interesting, consistent things I heard in doing the anecdotal research for the book was from people who are saying, I've been telling people this whole year that I've been missing all the gatherings and the social events. And in reality, I haven't been missing those.
Interesting.
Really experienced a sense of kind of calm and being able to live according to who I am. And so how am I going to navigate not having that culturally okay way of saying no?
Yeah, oh, sorry, I can't make it. Yeah.
Right. So I just go into some ways of how we can renegotiate those norms and set them into place. And then talking a lot about how to also realign our relationships with technology. We know that prior to the pandemic, we were already facing skyrocketing levels of social anxiety and kind of awkward avoidance of awkward moments interpersonally in a way that was harming the development of our brains and our just sense of self. And so talking about how we can make sure that we do this re-entry in such a way that we are balancing that being healthy, whole people while also being interconnected.
Two viewers were asking, Emily Hill and Willie Huey were both asking, they'd be really interested to know about the effect of of younger kids. You know, they've been isolated. Drew, you know, was saying like, it's prime video game time. He's having a hard time getting the kids kind of out of the house. Okay, now you guys got to go back to school. You're out in the mix, interacting with teachers and kids again. And they're just, you know, they're just like us. Their brains are developing, and I mean that takes practice too. And it's even scarier, you know, as a kid when you're worried about, you know, what other kids think of you or confidence or whatever. Do you have any advice for parents like that?
I do. I think this is going to be one of the toughest times, and I think parents are going to be asked to navigate this really difficult time at a time where they are more exhausted than they've ever been, and more ready for the kids to just be, you know, out and doing their thing. Because in many ways, parents have had to put themselves even more second than they normally do in order to facilitate so many opportunities for their children in this time. So I think the biggest thing I would say is to really set realistic expectations about what this transition is going to look like. This is not just going to be like, school's open, kids are feeling great, and they go to school and are just happy as clams when they come home. They're going to be irritated. They're going to have a lot of big feelings. They're probably going to be navigating extra kind of odd social dynamics that are going to be happening in those spaces that they're going to be asked and required to navigate. So kind of setting our expectation that it's going to be, it's going to require more of us for a couple of weeks, and that if we can hold out and put that in and not just, you know, kind of overhype the happy things like, hey, isn't this great, kiddos? But instead ask a lot of questions that are open-ended and not yes or no questions, not, you know, did you have a great day today? Instead, tell me about your day today. You know, and then to watch our children's cues. If they're isolating a lot, if they're overly agitated, if they're reactive and angry or tearful, to create extra space for them to kind of maybe dial down on those habits like video gaming or, you know, binging on social media or binging on devices in general, because those are ways that they have felt like they have managed their mental health. And so we don't want to just pull those away. We want to instead offer lots of great embodied opportunities, lots of great opportunities to actually let the feelings surface and then, you know, kind of phase out. So we want to step down the use and the unhealthy coping and step up opportunities for them really working through this huge transition.
Dr. Doreen, go ahead. No, you finish.
A lot of kids have also really experienced variants of cyberbullying during this year, or feeling like their friends are connecting, you know, in digital spaces that they're left out of, and they may not have talked with their parents about that openly, because many kids don't. And so there also, if you notice a real hesitancy about the interactive part of life, I would be, you know, asking some deeper questions of those kiddos and helping them navigate.
I was just going to share with you, Dr. Doreen, something I heard in my house this week. One 13-year-old boy said to the other 13-year-old boy, you know, I'm just going to keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and I think the more I practice, the better I'll get. And normally you'd think that's a good thing, right? Like, I'd be excited if he was talking about his hitting swing, but he was talking about his favorite video game. And I'm like, really? Like, we're practicing the video game before we, I guess they have like practice time now on the video game before they go out and like play with others and they show off their skills. But they are, it has happened. We were pretty good, I think, as parents of trying to manage the screen time. But what we did was we just kind of let it happen wide open, because we thought this is really their only opportunity to interact with kids their age over the course of the last year for the most part. Now, things started to open up a little bit. They got to get out and start playing baseball again, which is great. But for a good stretch there, their only interaction was through those video games. So it was a bit of a conundrum. Do you keep them off the screen and keep them away from their friends, or do you just let them play down there for a long time because, man, they're socializing?
Absolutely. And again, we kind of ran into this time in a panic, and we created a lot of habits that we didn't know were going to be entrenched for a full year. So it is going to take, you know, some really deliberate work. It's very hard for people who play a lot of video games or have devices as a major part of their days. It's a very hard task to ask them to set those down, and especially children, that pruning that happens in the brain, you know, kind of takes away some of the self-regulation skills that make it possible for them to say, okay, I'll stop doing this thing that is so fun because I know I need to develop something else. They just don't have that as developed. So that's where step down is so important, not just asking them to cold turkey be off the game, but, you know, finding safe and really kind of edgy or fiery opportunities opportunities for our kids to encounter other kids, while at the same time doing emotional regulation skills and backing off of the devices. It is pretty important that we help them navigate the backing off, because we know that high levels of use really do impair focus and the ability to be emotionally regulated. So it is important.
That's a hard one, because it's do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
Because the adults can't put it down.
Right.
I was talking about during the show today, I carry this thing pretty much constantly all day. And since we've been talking again, you kind of get me back to, okay, look, I know I need to stop a little bit, but it is that you feel productive, because if I'm waiting, I can do a little extra something. Or if I'm bored, I can do a little something. Or I've got to check the Instagram or whatever it is. But it's made to do that, right? It is our choice, but it's not necessarily all our fault, because this technology stimulates the brain in a way that this is uncharted territory in a way.
I didn't
told her
grow
it makes
up
me
with
feel
that.
efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with that, but imagine we're fully formed adults and it's hard to do. So for a kid, forget about it. There's just no chance.
You know, along those lines, Dr. Doreen, maybe you could speak to this. Our pediatrician said there is the difference between turning your phone off at night and having it in the room, like it's off, but it's in the room. There's a difference between that and actually physically getting that phone out of the room altogether. Have you heard about this study that was done and why that can be beneficial? Again, not just turning your phone off, but getting it out of the room.
Yeah, we are so aware. I think of our phones as kind of this ambient background noise that is constantly telling us there's potential that we're missing. Either we're missing information or connection or entertainment. And so literally psychologically, when it is within our proximity, a part of our brain is attuned to it. And a part of our brain, especially in the kind of culture we live in, where we do have to be hyperproductive and hyper alert and hyper aware, when it is in our geographic proximity, we feel drawn to it and we are more able to separate from it. It's the out of sight, out of mind thing, you know, and the further distance we can create from it, the more we are forcing ourselves to be fully present in the moment that we're in. So it kind of has a double help. It helps us to be more present if it's not near us. And it forces us to kind of develop the skills of, you know, tolerating the discomfort. So it's got this emotional benefit as well.
Absolutely. Doreen, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for joining us on Sunrise Extra. We are against a tight deadline, but one more time, say the name of your book and where we can find it.
So it's called Restart, Designing a Healthy Post-Pandemic Life. And you can find it on from your local bookseller on pre-order, or also the main online distributors.
All right, Dr. Doreen, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. You guys have a great Friday.